Hi everyone, I'm David Fisher, and this is Presidential Perspectives, where we take a look at current events through the lens of American history and seen through the lives of the presidents of the United States. For today's episode, Happy President's Day. Yes, the third Monday in February is a national holiday. That is today, although a lot of companies don't recognize this holiday anymore. It seems like as new holidays have come into play, this one's kind of been shoved off to the side sometimes. But for me, when I was growing up, we always celebrated George Washington's birthday. My mom would actually bake the family a beautiful cherry pie. It was really good. Why a cherry pie? Well, it goes back to the mythical story about Washington cutting down his father's cherry tree as a youth and refusing to lie about it. It originally appeared in this book from Mason Weems, The Life of Washington. This is my version from 1804. Here's the original version of that story. George said his father, "Do you know who killed that beautiful little cherry tree yonder in the garden?" This was a tough question, and George staggered under it for a moment, but quickly recovered himself, and looking at his father with the sweet face of youth, brightened with the inexpressible charm of all-conquering truth, he bravely cried out, "I can't tell a lie, Pa. You know I can't tell a lie. I did cut it with my hatchet." "Run to my arms, you dearest boy," cried his father in transports. "Run to my arms." Again, a mythical story, but embraced by Americans sort of ever since. So this was a celebration in my household with the cherry pie growing up. George Washington's birthday. But for President's Day today, again, not a lot of folks are celebrating this by giving the day off. We do have plenty of store sales for the holiday weekend. The question is, what's the history of President's Day? And it's actually kind of a complex journey. First of all, there is no federal holiday called President's Day. We'll get to that in a moment. All of this starts with Washington, the father of the country, and even his birthday is a bit confusing. See, he was originally born February the 11th of 1731. That was according to the Julian calendar. But Britain and the rest of Europe started to recognize the more accurate Gregorian calendar in the 1750s, so Washington's birthday all of a sudden changed. It became February the 22nd of 1732, and that's the date that's been celebrated ever since. Now, it has been celebrated as an unofficial holiday, began right after his death in 1799, joining Independence Day, Christmas Day, New Year's Day as the national holidays for the United States. Again, Washington's birthday sort of unofficially recognized every year. Later on, you had Abraham Lincoln adding a day of national Thanksgiving in the 1860s as the last Thursday in November, later switched to the fourth Thursday in November. But Washington's birthday was formally added to this list in 1879 when Congress passed a bill to that effect, signed into law by Rutherford Hayes, a formal holiday based on that Gregorian calendar date, February the 22nd. Traditionally on that day, a sitting senator would rise up in the well of the Senate and read Washington's farewell address to commemorate the day. Well, these things have changed a bit, though, with the Uniform Holiday Act. This was passed in 1968 and went into effect under Richard Nixon in 1971. Kind of wanted to make things more convenient. Take those holidays, a bunch of them, and move them to Mondays so people could have three-day weekends. And that included Washington's birthday, Memorial Day, Veterans Day, and a new holiday called Columbus Day. Now, Veterans Day was eventually moved back to November the 11th, originally called Armistice Day to celebrate the end of World War I. So that's off the Monday calendar, but these others are on it. And for Washington's birthday, a formal federal holiday still on the third Monday of February, so it could be recognized every year. But still, how did we go from this Washington's birthday to President's Day? Well, this had to do with the fact, in part, that Abraham Lincoln was also born in February. He was born on February the 12th. And again, to celebrate in my household, my mom would go back to baking, and she would make this delicious Lincoln's Log, this chocolate swirl cake. Why would she make that? Well, in honor of Lincoln as a rail splitter when he was in his youth. But again, this started to be celebrated not as a federal holiday, Lincoln's birthday, but many states and school districts would give kids the day off, and they were starting, again, maybe too many holidays. Let's consolidate this. It's kind of in the 1980s. That's when we got President's Day. We had a lot of business sales to celebrate, the holiday weekend. President's Day, though, is not a federal holiday. It never changed at the federal level. It's still Washington's birthday. In fact, the Office of Personnel and Management in the federal government even once put out a notice to this effect where they said this holiday is designated as Washington's birthday in Section 6103A of Title V of the U.S. Code, which is the law that specifies holidays for federal employees. Though other institutions, such as state and local governments and private businesses, may use other names, it is our policy to always refer to holidays by the names designated in the law. Washington's birthday is the holiday, even though it's been called President's Day for the last 40 or 50 years. So it is an official holiday, the third Monday in February, Washington's birthday, again, not celebrated nearly as much as it used to, as other holidays have kind of come in, and it's been a little bit pushed out of the calendar. Now, this is the only holiday that is focused on a United States president, but presidents have certainly been celebrated over the years, and a couple in particular, annual celebrations linked to Thomas Jefferson and Andrew Jackson. These were originally called Jefferson Day dinners, which were kind of patriotic opportunities for politicians to give speeches around the country, the most famous and controversial of which occurred only about 6 years after Jefferson died. This is in 1832, the Indian Queen Hotel in Washington, D.C., in the middle of a constitutional crisis, where showing up at the Indian Queen Hotel, you've got President Andrew Jackson and Vice President John Calhoun from South Carolina. What are they in fights about? Well, this was a nullification crisis going on over the so-called Tariff of Abominations, which had been nullified in the state of South Carolina, Calhoun's home. Jackson, though, when he stood up to give his Jefferson Day toast at this particular gathering, he was no bones about him. This talk of secession and nullification, not going to stand on his watch. He boldly said, "Our Union, it must be preserved," and then total silence. Tension in the room, waiting for the vice president to come and give his toast at this Jefferson Day dinner, and he came back right away. John Calhoun toasted, "The Union next to our liberty most dear. May we all remember it can only be preserved by respecting the rights of the states and by distributing equally the benefit and burden of the Union." They were very much at odds. The country was much at odds. Calhoun would soon resign the vice presidency, take a seat in the United States Senate, where fortunately a compromise deal was reached on that tariff. The crisis did fizzle. This was, though, a notable moment in a Jefferson Day dinner. Now, those Jefferson Day dinners would certainly continue. Presidents often giving speeches to large gatherings over the years, rousing addresses sort of over time. Many of these would eventually be called Jefferson-Jackson Day dinners. That was the common name for many, many years, celebrating the founders of the Democratic Party, principally. In those days, the Democrats believed in small government, states' rights, individual liberty. That was sort of their core ideological foundations dating back to Jefferson and to Jackson. Many of those Jefferson-Jackson dinners, again, involved politicians throughout the years. In fact, Franklin Roosevelt, shown here at one of those Jefferson-Jackson Day dinners, was actually writing his address in 1945 on the day that he died, was writing an address for the upcoming Jefferson-Jackson Day dinner. Again, he died shortly into his fourth term in April of 1845. Around this time, even these things began to change a little bit, from just going from patriotic gatherings to fundraisers. The Democratic Party really started to raise a lot of money at these Jefferson-Jackson dinners. Again, presidents, politicians, other leaders around the country would gather, give these patriotic addresses, and then they would raise some cash. The Republicans responded in some sense with what they called the Lincoln dinners, and eventually also many called Lincoln-Reagan dinners, again, principally as fundraisers, but also sort of patriotic opportunities for politicians annually to give speeches to large crowds. Now, none of these were ever official holidays. They were remembrances of these presidents, and again, opportunities to gather. We've only had one president honored with a holiday. In fact, the United States has had only two individual people ever honored with a holiday: George Washington and Martin Luther King. So when we celebrate here President's Day, as it's often called today, remember, it's really George Washington's birthday that we're celebrating on the third Monday in February. And for me, that means more time for some cherry pie. Another opportunity to celebrate the father of our country. Now, for more on George Washington and some of the Jefferson and Jackson Day dinner information, check out the links in the description here. Also, to some of the playlists that we cover in the Presidential Chronicles videos. Also, check out my books on Amazon.com. Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel. For now, I am David Fisher, and this is Presidential Perspectives from Presidential Chronicles.